The throne room doors groaned open, their weight protesting against the small hands pushing them. Mona slipped through the gap she'd created, her worn pink dress catching the golden sunlight that poured through the arched windows like liquid honey. The beauty of the room, soaring ceilings, marble columns, tapestries depicting glorious battles, felt like a mockery. All that grandeur, and at its center, sat a man who looked more prisoner than king. Alpha King Luthan slouched in his ornate throne, his powerful frame rendered useless by the curse that had stolen his legs 5 years ago. His dark hair hung limp around a face that might have been handsome if not for the bitterness carved into every line. The purple robes and ermine-trimmed cape, the golden crown, all of it seemed like costume jewelry on a broken mannequin. Mona's footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Each step felt impossibly loud in the cavernous space. Guards lined the walls, their eyes tracking her with a mixture of amusement and contempt. "Another miracle seeker," one muttered to his companion, not bothering to lower his voice. "How many does this make? 50? 63, the other replied with a snort, though this one's barely out of nappies. Their laughter rippled through the room. Mona's cheeks burned, but she kept walking, her small hands clenched into fists at her sides. The ribbon in her brown hair, the one her mother had tied that morning with trembling fingers, felt like her only tether to courage. Luthan didn't even glance up. His ice-blue eyes remained fixed on some middle distance, as if the child approaching his throne didn't exist at all. "Your Majesty," Mona began, "I don't see children." His voice was flat, devoid of inflection. It was somehow worse than anger. It was complete indifference. "Leave." Mona's breath caught, but she forced herself forward until she stood directly before the throne. She had to crane her neck back to see his face, and even then, he wouldn't look at her. "Please, I just need—" "You need nothing from me." Luthan's fingers drummed against the arm of his throne, the only part of him that seemed capable of movement below his chest. "Whatever fairy tale brought you here, whatever desperate hope your parents fed you, it's a lie. I don't perform miracles. I don't cure the sick. I don't even cure myself." His eyes finally dropped to her, cold as winter stone. "Now leave before you waste any more of my time." "I need you to marry my mum." The words tumbled out in a rush, raw and desperate. For a heartbeat, the throne room fell into perfect silence. Then it shattered with laughter, harsh, cruel, echoing off the marble and crystal like breaking glass. Guards doubled over. A courtier in the corner wiped tears from his eyes. Even the servants pretending invisibility along the walls couldn't suppress their snickers. Luthan's lips twisted into something that might have been a smile if it held any warmth. "Marry your mother?" He leaned forward slightly, the movement clearly painful. "Child, I can't even stand. I can't walk. I certainly can't walk to an altar. What makes you think I'd want a wife to bear witness to this?" He gestured vaguely at his useless legs. "Go home, play with dolls. Leave the adults to their misery." The dismissal hit like a slap, but Mona's hands tightened into smaller fists. "My mum's dying." Her voice cracked but didn't break. "She has the same curse as you. The same magic that took your legs is taking her life. She's a healer, the best there is. And she says you have the cure. The ancient one, locked in your vault." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. "If you marry her, she can heal you, and you can save her. Please." Luthan's amusement curdled into something darker. "A healer who can't heal herself. How convenient." He beckoned to the guards. "I've heard every scheme, every desperate promise. Miracle cures, ancient remedies, true love's kiss." His voice dripped with venom. "All lies from people who wanted gold, favor, or glory. Your mother is no different. She's using you, child. Sending a little girl to manipulate me with tears and innocence." He waved his hand dismissively. "The answer is no. It will always be no. Guards, remove this child from my palace. And spread word. The next person who wastes my time with false hope will be jailed for fraud." "Your Majesty, please!" Mona's voice rose as guards approached. Enough! Luthan's roar echoed through the chamber, silencing even the mocking whispers. You want the truth? Your mother is dying because that's what the curse does. I'm dying too, just slower. There is no cure, there is no hope, there's only waiting for the end. His eyes bore into her with terrible intensity. Now go home and stop filling your mother's last days with false expectations. Let her die in peace instead of chasing fantasies. Rough hands gripped Mona's arms. She struggled, her small body no match for the guard's strength. You're wrong! She can help you! Drag her out, if you must, Luthan said coldly, already turning his gaze away. And bar the gates! I'm finished with desperate fools! As the guards hauled her backward toward the doors, Mona's feet scrambling for purchase on the smooth marble, something inside her snapped. The fear, the desperation, the weeks of watching her mother fade, it all crystallized into pure, furious clarity. Then I hope you enjoyed dying alone! Her voice cut through the chamber like a blade, sharp and raw and absolutely unafraid. The guards froze. Every head turned. Even Luthan's eyes snapped back to her. Mona stood in their grip, tears finally streaming down her face, but her gaze never wavered. My mum is dying and she's still kind. She still smiles at me every morning. Even though I know it hurts, she still tells me stories and makes me laugh and holds me when I'm scared. Her voice shook with rage and grief. But you? You gave up. You sit in your golden cage, feeling sorry for yourself, while everyone around you suffers because you're too afraid to even try. She gulped air, her small chest heaving. So fine. Keep your cure. Keep your bitterness. Die here alone with all your pretty things and your guards who laugh at children. At least my mum will die loved. The silence that followed was absolute. No one laughed now. No one even breathed. Luthan stared at the child, this tiny, insignificant creature, and felt something he hadn't experienced in 5 years pierce through the armor of his self-pity. Shame. Hot, burning, undeniable shame. Wait! The word escaped before he could stop it. The guards paused, uncertain. Luthan's jaw clenched. Every instinct screamed to let her go, to retreat back into comfortable numbness. But those words, dying alone, echoed in his skull like prophecy. He looked at Mona's tear-streaked face, at the desperate love burning in her eyes, and saw something he'd forgotten existed. Someone fighting not for themselves, but for another. Release her, he said quietly. Leave us. The palace gates slammed shut with a finality that echoed through Mona's chest. She pressed her small hands against the iron bars, watching the guards disappear into the courtyard beyond. For a moment, she considered turning around, walking back to the cramped room where her mother lay dying. Going home to admit failure. Then she thought of Veronica's hollow eyes that morning, the way her hands shook when she tried to braid Mona's hair, the forced brightness in her voice when she said, It's all right, sweetheart. We'll be fine. They wouldn't be fine. Not without help. Mona sank onto the cold stone steps flanking the gate and pulled her knees to her chest. The worn pink dress offered little protection against the evening chill, but she'd endured worse. She'd survived 3 months watching her mother fade. She could survive a night on palace steps. By morning, frost clung to the hem of her dress. Mona's fingers were numb, her stomach a hollow ache. But when the gates creaked open for the servants' entrance, she was on her feet. Please, she called to the guard supervising the morning deliveries. I need to see the king again. My mum, she invented the healing technique his soldiers use for battlefield wounds. She saved hundreds of lives. She deserves... Move along, girl. The guard didn't even look at her. King's orders, no petitioners. Mona tried the west entrance an hour later. She's the only healer who's survived this curse for 5 years. She knows things about the magic that no one else... Not interested, the south gate that afternoon. You're both dying anyway. What do you have to lose by just talking to her? A different guard, this one almost sympathetic. Look, child, I don't make the rules. The king's been clear. No healers, no miracle workers, no exceptions. He glanced around, then slipped her a bread roll from his pack. Go home. Take care of your mum while you still can." The kindness hurt worse than the rejections. Inside the palace, Luthan listened to the daily reports with growing irritation. "The child is still there, Your Majesty," the captain of the guard reported. "Sleeping on the steps. She's tried 4 different entrances today." "Then post more guards." Luthan's fingers drummed against his throne. "If she's so persistent, her handlers must be desperate. I won't be manipulated by—" "Nephew." Alfred's smooth voice cut through the chamber like oil on water. The chief advisor stepped from the shadows where he always seemed to lurk, his thin face arranged in concern. "Perhaps we should consider who's truly behind this charade." Luthan's eyes narrowed. "Meaning? The child is what? 8? 9? Alfred spread his hands. "Children that age don't orchestrate palace infiltrations alone. Someone's coaching her. Feeding her lines about healing techniques and curse knowledge." He moved closer, his voice dropping. "Someone who knows exactly what to say to prey on your condition." "A healer who survived 5 years with the curse," Luthan said slowly. "That's what the child claims." Alfred's expression remained carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "Impossible. The curse is absolute. No one survives that long with full magical capacity intact. Either the woman isn't truly cursed, or—" he paused meaningfully. "She's not truly a healer. Either way, she's using that poor child as a pawn." Luthan wanted to believe it, wanted to dismiss the entire situation as manipulation, to retreat back into the comfortable certainty of his isolation. But he kept seeing Mona's face, the raw desperation, the furious grief when she'd called him out for dying alone. That hadn't been coached. That had been real. "What would you have me do?" he asked Alfred. "Jail a child for loving her mother? Send her home with coin," Alfred suggested smoothly. "Enough to make the mother's final days comfortable. It's mercy, not cruelty." Mercy. The word tasted like ash. By the 3rd day, Mona's voice had grown hoarse from calling through the gates. Her dress was filthy, her hair matted, her lips cracked from thirst. A kitchen servant had snuck her water that morning, whispering, "You should go home, little one. This isn't worth your life." But it was. It was worth everything. She was forming her next argument, something about how the curse's magical signature matched records from the old wars, when the world tilted sideways. The cobblestones rushed up to meet her, and Mona realized distantly that she hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her vision tunneled to black. She woke to shouting, "Just a child, for God's sake." The king's orders were clear. "Look at her! She's half-starved!" Mona's eyes fluttered open. She was still on the ground, still outside the gates, but now a crowd had gathered. Servants, guards, even a few courtiers stared down at her with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. "Get the healer," someone said. "The king said no healers. She means a palace healer, you fool, not the mother." The voices blurred together. Mona tried to push herself up, but her arms wouldn't cooperate. Through the haze, she heard new footsteps, heavier, more purposeful. "What's this commotion?" The voice was cold, familiar. "Your Majesty?" A guard's nervous reply. "The child collapsed. We were just—" "Bring her inside." Silence fell like a stone. "Your Majesty?" The guard sounded stunned. "Are you deaf?" Luthan's voice cut through the confusion. "Bring the child inside. Feed her. Clean her." A pause, heavy with something Mona couldn't identify. "Then bring her to me." Through the fog of hunger and exhaustion, Mona felt hands lift her gently. As consciousness slipped away again, she heard Luthan's voice one more time. So quiet she might have imagined it. 3 days. The stubborn little fool lasted 3 days. And beneath the anger in his tone, something else lurked. Something that might have been unwilling respect, or perhaps just the faintest crack in his armor of bitterness. Mona woke to softness, a concept so foreign after 3 days on stone that her first instinct was panic. Her eyes snapped open to find herself in a guest room draped in velvet and silk, morning light filtering through gauzy curtains. Someone had bathed her, dressed her in a clean linen shift, braided her hair with a ribbon far finer than the threadbare one her mother had tied. The door opened before she could process the strangeness of luxury. A servant entered, carrying a tray laden with bread, cheese, fruit, more food than Mona had seen in weeks. The woman's expression was carefully neutral as she set it down. "Eat," she said, not unkindly. "The king will see you within the hour." Hope flared in Mona's chest. "He'll help! He'll hear you!" The servant's tone killed the hope instantly. "Once? Then you'll be sent home with coin for your mother's comfort." The word hung in the air like a death knell. Comfort, not cure, not salvation. Comfort, the thing you gave the dying to ease their final days. "No." Mona's voice came out small but fierce. "No, I won't take his money and watch her die. I won't." The servant's face softened with pity, which somehow made it worse. "Child, sometimes all we can do is make the end gentle. She's not at the end, she just needs—" But the servant was already leaving, the door clicking shut, with terrible finality. Mona stared at the food, her stomach growling despite the nausea churning through her. She forced herself to eat, mechanical and joyless. She'd need strength for this. Whatever happened in that throne room, she couldn't afford to faint again. An hour later, guards escorted her back through corridors that seemed designed to make people feel small. The throne room looked different in daylight, less shadowed, but no less intimidating. Luthan sat in the same position, as if he'd never moved, his ice-blue eyes tracking her approach with an expression she couldn't read. "You're persistent," he said without preamble. "I'll grant you that." Mona stopped before the throne, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles went white. This was her last chance. No more desperate pleas or childish proposals, just truth, raw and bleeding and impossible to ignore. "My mum used to carry me everywhere when I was little," she began, her voice steady despite the tears already building. "On her shoulders, spinning until we both got dizzy. She was strong, so strong." She swallowed hard. Now she can barely lift a cup. "Her hands shake so badly, she dropped her healing tools last week. The ones her mother gave her, that she's used for 20 years. She cried over the broken pieces, like she was grieving something already dead." Luthan's expression remained carved from stone, but he didn't interrupt. "She sleeps 16 hours a day now. Used to be 14, before that, 12. Mona's voice cracked. "I watch the sleep get longer every week, and I know what it means. One day she'll go to sleep and just not wake up." The tears spilled over now, hot and shameless. "And she pretends. Every morning she wakes up, she smiles at me and says, 'Good morning, my love,' like everything's fine. Like I can't see the pain in her eyes. Like I don't hear her crying at night when she thinks I'm asleep." "Child," Luthan started, but Mona cut him off. "I'm 8 years old." The words burst out, anguished and furious. "I can't fix this. I can't make her better. I've tried. I've made her tea and read her books, and held her hand until mine went numb, but it doesn't help. Nothing helps." She was shaking now, her small frame racked with sobs she'd been holding back for months. "I can't save her alone." "But you can. You have the cure locked in your vault. Why? Why keep it there if you won't use it?" "Because I have used it!" Luthan's voice thundered through the chamber, making Mona flinch. His hands gripped the throne arms until his knuckles went white. 63 times I've let people try. 63 healers, mystics, miracle workers. Every single one promising they could break the curse if I just gave them access to the vault, to the cure, to the ancient magic. His eyes burned with old rage, and every single one was a liar. Charlatans who wanted gold, glory, or favor with the crown. They took what they wanted and left me exactly as broken as before. He leaned forward, his face twisted with bitter accusation. "So tell me, child, why should your mother be any different? What makes her special? What makes her anything but another desperate fraud using you as bait?" The question should have devastated her. Instead, Mona felt a strange calm settle over her grief. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and met his gaze without flinching. Because she's dying too. 4 words. Simple. Undeniable. She has the same curse as you, Mona continued quietly. The same magic eating her alive from the inside. Those other healers, they had nothing to lose. They could lie and walk away. But my mom? Her voice broke again, but she pushed through. She has nothing to gain but her life, and mine. If she fails, she dies. If she succeeds, maybe we both get to live. She took a shaking breath. That's the difference. She's not trying to take something from you. She's trying to survive, just like you. Silence filled the throne room, heavy, suffocating. Luthan stared at the child before him. This tiny creature who'd stripped away every defense with brutal, simple honesty. For 5 years, he'd hidden behind cynicism and bitterness, convinced that everyone wanted something from him, that trust was weakness and hope was delusion. But this child wasn't asking for gold or glory. She was asking for a chance. One chance for 2 people trapped in the same nightmare to maybe, possibly, save each other. His fingers drummed against the throne, once, twice, then stopped. Your mother, he said finally, his voice carefully controlled. She's truly cursed. Not just sick, not just… The same as you, Mona whispered. Exactly the same. Luthan closed his eyes, exhaled slowly. Bring her here, he said, and the words tasted like surrender. Tomorrow. I'll see her myself. Veronica made it as far as the palace courtyard before her legs gave out. One moment she was walking, each step a small victory of will over failing body, and the next the cobblestones were rushing up to meet her. She caught herself on trembling hands, gasping as pain lanced through her chest. The curse had accelerated in the 3 days since Mona left. What little strength remained was burning away like kindling. Mom! Mona's scream cut through the courtyard. She'd been waiting by the gates, pacing, and now she ran toward the crumpled figure in the healer's worn traveling cloak. Guards converged instantly, hands on weapons. Stop right there! Who are you? How did you get past? That's my mother! Mona threw herself down beside Veronica, small hands hovering uselessly over her mother's shaking form. Please, someone help her! From his throne room window 3 stories above, Luthan watched the scene unfold. He'd positioned himself there deliberately after ordering Veronica's audience, telling himself it was strategic, better to observe before committing to anything. But now, watching the woman try and fail to push herself upright, he felt ice slide down his spine. Her veins were visible beneath pale skin, dark as ink, spreading like roots of poison from her heart outward. He knew that pattern, had watched it creep across his own body for 5 years, the visible mark of magic consuming life force from within. Your Majesty. Alfred appeared at his elbow like a summoned ghost. You cannot allow that woman into the palace. If the curse is contagious, it's not contagious. Luthan's voice was flat. We both know that. We know nothing about her variant, the risk. Bring her to the healing ward. Luthan cut across his uncle's protests. Immediately. Alfred's jaw tightened. Nephew, I must counsel. Now. Luthan's eyes never left the courtyard, where Mona was crying over her mother's still form. Before she dies on my doorstep and proves the child right about everything. By the time servants carried Veronica to the healing ward, Luthan had made the painful journey down from his throne room. His attendants had wanted to carry him. They always did, but he'd refused with the same bitter pride that governed everything now. He'd rather crawl than be hauled around like cargo. He arrived to find Mona holding vigil beside the bed where they'd laid her mother. The child's face was streaked with tears, her small hand clutching Veronica's limp fingers, as if she could anchor her to life through will alone. Veronica's eyes fluttered open as Luthan's chair was positioned nearby. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, 2 people trapped in the same nightmare, meeting for the first time. You're the king, Veronica said finally, her voice hoarse but sharp. Not a question. An accusation. And you're the healer my palace has been discussing for 3 days. Luthan's tone matched hers for coolness. Your daughter is persistent. My daughter is desperate. Veronica tried to sit up, failed, and settled for glaring from the pillow. As am I. I didn't come here to beg, Your Majesty. I came to retrieve Mona and take her home before— She stopped, glancing at her daughter. Before you die, Luthan finished bluntly. Yes, I can see how close you are. Veronica's eyes flashed with anger and shame in equal measure. How generous of you to catalog my deterioration. I'm not cataloging, I'm recognizing. Luthan gestured at his useless legs. We wear the same chains, healer. I've simply worn them longer. Something in Veronica's expression shifted, the defensiveness cracking slightly. 5 years, she said quietly. They say you've been cursed for 5 years. And you? 5 years next month. Her hand tightened around Mona's. If I make it that long. You won't, Luthan said, and Mona made a small wounded sound. He ignored it. Not at this rate of progression. I'd give you 3 weeks, maybe 4 if you're stubborn. I'm stubborn, Veronica shot back, but her voice wavered. Silence fell, thick and uncomfortable. Mona looked between them with growing frustration. 2 drowning people arguing about who was sinking faster. Why are you both so afraid to try? She burst out. They turned to her in unison, matching expressions of surprise. I'm not afraid, Luthan said coldly. I'm realistic. I've seen— 63 failures, Mona interrupted. I know. You told me. But you never tried with someone who has the curse too, did you? She looked at her mother. And you never asked for help because you're too proud to admit you need it. Mona, Veronica started. No! Tears streamed down the child's face again. You're both dying and you're both alone, and you both have pieces of what might save you, but you're too scared, or too proud, or too angry to even talk about it. Her voice broke. I'm 8. I can't fix this by myself. But maybe you could fix it together. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Luthan and Veronica stared at each other, walls still firmly in place, but perhaps, finally, with cracks showing. The curse, Veronica said slowly, has a signature, a magical pattern. I've studied it for 5 years. It's not natural decay. Luthan's fingers drummed against his chair. Continue. It's deliberate draining. Designed by someone with intimate knowledge of life magic. She pushed herself up slightly, wincing. Someone who understood how to make it sustained, progressive, self-perpetuating. My father's cure, Luthan said carefully, is sealed in a vault, blood magic. Only my line can access it. Veronica's eyes sharpened despite her weakness. Blood magic, that requires— Royal lineage, yes. Luthan watched her face. Which means whatever's in that vault was meant specifically for me, or my heirs. But you've never accessed it? I can't. Bitterness crept into his voice. The ritual requires certain physical capabilities I no longer possess. Understanding dawned across Veronica's face. And I have the curse knowledge, but not the bloodline to open the vault. We need each other, Mona said quietly. See? They did see, finally. Reluctantly. 2 proud, broken people, forced to acknowledge that their only path to survival ran through trusting a stranger who understood their pain because they lived it too. One attempt, Luthan said finally. You help me access the vault. I share whatever's inside. After that, we'll both probably be dead anyway, Veronica finished darkly. So what do we have to lose? Everything, Luthan replied. Or nothing. I can't decide which is worse. The archive room smelled of old parchment and beeswax candles. Veronica hunched over a tome nearly as large as Mona, her finger tracing lines of ancient text, while Luthan watched from his chair, his father's research notes spread across his lap. The seal uses threefold binding, Veronica murmured, not looking up. Blood, breath, and will. Your father was thorough. He was paranoid, Luthan corrected. He thought someone close to him would... He stopped abruptly. Veronica glanced up, catching the shadow that crossed his face. Would what? Nothing. Continue. Before she could press, the archive door swung open. Alfred stepped inside, his thin frame blocking the lamplight from the corridor. Nephew, I've been searching for you. The grain reports require your immediate attention. Later, Luthan said without looking up. The farmers are waiting. I said later, uncle. There was steel beneath the words. Alfred's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Of course, though perhaps the healer should rest. She looks unwell. Veronica did look unwell, paler than yesterday, her hands trembling slightly as she turned pages. She'd blamed it on overwork when Mona asked that morning, but now even Luthan was frowning with concern. I'm fine, Veronica said tightly. Nevertheless. Alfred moved closer, his voice dripping false sympathy. One mustn't push too hard. The curse is unpredictable after all. It would be tragic if your condition worsened from strain. He left with that parting shot, and Mona felt something cold settle in her stomach. The way he'd said it, almost like a promise rather than concern. Over the next 3 days, disaster followed disaster. Crucial documents went missing from the archives, pages torn from books Veronica needed. Mice, a servant suggested nervously. But Mona had seen no droppings, no gnaw marks, just clean, deliberate removal. Meetings were constantly interrupted. Alfred would appear with urgent matters requiring Luthan's immediate attention. Disputes that could have waited, reports that didn't actually need the king's review. Each interruption fractured their progress, leaving Veronica exhausted and Luthan increasingly frustrated. Worst of all, Veronica's condition deteriorated rapidly. The medicine the palace healers prepared seemed to help less each day. By the 4th evening, she could barely keep food down, her skin taking on a grayish pallor that made Mona's chest tighten with fear. It's the stress, Veronica insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. Mona noticed what the adults missed, or perhaps what they were too focused to see. Alfred was always there, every time something went wrong, every time a document vanished or a meeting was disrupted. She'd catch a glimpse of his dark robes disappearing around a corner, hear his smooth voice in an adjacent room. She started watching him the way a mouse watches a cat. On the 5th night, unable to sleep while her mother tossed with fever in the healing ward, Mona wandered the palace corridors. She told herself she was just restless, but her feet carried her toward the administrative wing where Alfred kept his offices. A sliver of lamplight showed beneath his door. Voices, low and urgent. Mona crept closer, her heart hammering. Getting too close. Alfred's voice, stripped of its usual smoothness. The healer understands the curse structure. If she identifies the signature, then increase the dosage. A second voice, rougher, unfamiliar. Make it look like natural progression. It needs to be subtle. If she dies too quickly, Luthan will investigate. And if she lives long enough to break the seal? Silence. Then Alfred, cold as winter stone. She won't. The healer is getting too close to the truth. Accelerate her deterioration. Make it look natural. By the time they realize what's happening, it will be too late. Mona's gasp was tiny, barely a breath, but in the quiet corridor, it sounded like a thunderclap. The voices stopped. Footsteps approached the door. Mona ran. She made it 3 steps before the door flew open. Alfred stood silhouetted against the lamplight, his usually composed face naked with calculation. Behind him, a hooded figure melted into the shadows. Little girl. Alfred's voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. He stepped into the corridor, and Mona backed away until her shoulders hit the opposite wall. You should be more careful where you wander. The palace can be dangerous at night. So many dark corners, so many ways a small child could disappear. It wasn't a warning. It was a threat wrapped in silk. I was just... Mona's voice came out as a squeak. Lost? Alfred took another step closer. Of course you were. Let me escort you back to the healing ward. We wouldn't want anything unfortunate to happen to you, not when your mother needs you so desperately. The emphasis on those last words made Mona's blood turn to ice. He was threatening her mother through her. That's all right, Mona forced out, already sidling along the wall. I remember the way. I insist. Alfred's hand reached for her shoulder. Mona bolted. She ran like she'd never run before, her bare feet slapping against marble, her breath coming in panicked gasps. Behind her, she heard Alfred's measured footsteps. Not running, not chasing, just following, confident, like a predator who knew the prey would tire eventually. She burst into the healing ward and threw herself at her mother's bedside. Veronica jerked awake, eyes foggy with fever. Mona, what? It's him, Mona sobbed into her mother's blankets. It's Alfred. He's poisoning you. He cursed you both. He's the monster. Veronica's hand found Mona's hair, stroking weakly. Sweetheart, you're having nightmares. I'm not. Mona looked up, tears streaming. I heard him. He's making you worse. He doesn't want you to break the curse because then you'll know he's the one who... Mona. Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. You're frightened and exhausted. Alfred is the king's uncle. He's been helping. He's been hurting you. But even as she said it, Mona saw the doubt in her mother's eyes. Saw the way Veronica glanced toward the door, as if expecting Alfred to appear and prove this was all childish imagination. The worst part was, Mona understood. She was 8. She had no proof, just the word of a terrified child against the king's trusted advisor. Who would believe her? She buried her face in the blankets and tried not to think about Alfred's cold smile, his soft threat, the hooded figure in the shadows. The man everyone trusted was the monster, and Mona had no idea how to make anyone see it. Mona burst into Luthan's study, her small chest heaving. Your uncle is the one hurting Mum. I heard him. He told someone to make her worse. Luthan looked up from his documents, brow furrowed. Mona, that's a serious accusation. I know what I heard. Her voice cracked with desperation. Before Luthan could respond, Alfred appeared in the doorway, his expression perfectly composed concern. Is everything all right? I heard shouting. His gaze fell on Mona with practiced warmth. Ah, the poor child must be overwrought. I was indeed speaking with Captain Aldrich last night about increased security around the healing ward. The girl must have misunderstood. He placed a gentle hand on Luthan's shoulder. Grief makes children imagine terrible things. Luthan's eyes softened with pity. Not for Alfred's deception, but for Mona's supposed delusion. Mona, I know you're frightened. I'm not making it up. But even as she protested, she saw the doubt in his face. Alfred's smile was patient, almost kind, and it made her want to scream. After Alfred escorted her out with false gentleness, Mona sat in the corridor, fists clenched. She couldn't prove what she knew, not yet, but she could do something else. The next afternoon, she found her mother and Luthan in the vault chamber, surrounded by ancient texts and magical instruments. They worked in careful silence, orbiting each other like wary planets, never quite connecting. I need to fetch more water for the cleansing ritual, Veronica said, standing stiffly. I'll summon a servant, Luthan replied without looking up. They were so careful, so distant, and time was running out. Mona waited until both were deep in the chamber, studying the vault's intricate seal. Then she darted forward and pulled the heavy iron door shut. The lock clicked with satisfying finality. Mona! Veronica's startled voice echoed. What are you doing? The door mechanism is jammed from the outside, Mona called through the thick wood. I'll go find help. Might take a while. She ignored the protests and settled onto the floor outside, pulling out the book she'd brought. She'd give them at least 3 hours. Inside, silence stretched like pulled thread. Your daughter, Luthan said finally, is remarkably stubborn. She learned from the best. Veronica's tone was dry, but Mona heard the hint of fondness even through the door. The first hour passed with stilted work-related conversation. The second hour brought a fragile quiet. But the third hour, that's when everything changed. "Why do you stay in that chair?" Veronica's question was soft but direct. "Even now when we're alone, there's no one to see weakness." The silence that followed was so long, Mona pressed her ear against the door. "Because standing requires help," Luthan said finally, his voice raw. "And I've had enough of being helpless. The paralysis didn't just take my legs, Veronica. It took everything. I was a warrior, a protector. Now I'm—" He exhaled shakily. "I'm half a man in a throne built for kings." "You think I don't understand?" Veronica's voice broke. "I'm a healer who can't heal. Every day I feel my gift dying inside me, like watching a light go out one flicker at a time. Your curse took your legs. Mine is taking my soul. I'm sorry." The words sounded torn from him. "I'm sorry for laughing at Mona that first day. For being cruel when all she wanted was to save you. I'm sorry for being too proud to ask for help sooner," Veronica whispered. "For wasting weeks because I couldn't bear to need someone." "We're both fools, then." "The worst kind." A sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "The kind who suffer alone when we could suffer together." Outside, Mona wiped her own tears and counted to 100. Then she discovered the jammed door and freed them with exaggerated surprise. When the door swung open, her mother and Luthan weren't on opposite sides of the chamber anymore. They sat together on the stone floor, Veronica's hand resting on his arm, both their faces marked by tears and something fragile, something like hope. They looked at each other now not as king and subject, not as desperate allies forced together by circumstance. They looked at each other as two people who finally understood they didn't have to carry their breaking alone. Veronica collapsed during breakfast 3 days later. One moment she was reaching for tea, the next she was on the floor, convulsing, darkness spreading beneath her skin like ink in water. "Mom!" Mona's scream brought guards running. Luthan had himself carried to the healing ward, refusing to wait in his chambers while Veronica fought for breath. When she finally stabilized, her skin had taken on a translucent quality. Veins, visible like dark rivers beneath parchment. "We're out of time." Luthan's voice was steel. "We attempt the vault ritual tonight, ready or not." Veronica, too weak to argue, could only nod. The preparation took hours. Ancient texts spread across tables. Magical implements, arranged in precise patterns. The ritual required blood from both of them, a binding that would either break the curses or kill them trying. Mona sat in the corner, small and terrified, clutching her mother's shawl like a lifeline. "Your blood first," Luthan said, offering Veronica the ceremonial blade. His hand shook, not from the paralysis, but from fear. Just a few drops on the seal. Veronica took the blade, her healer's instincts engaged even through her weakness. She pricked her finger, let 3 drops fall onto the ancient stone. The blood hissed on contact, and magic flared, silver-white light that made the vault's runes glow. But something was wrong. Veronica gasped, her eyes widening. The magic wasn't just responding to the ritual. It was responding to something else, something inside her. She felt it like a living thing, a parasitic thread of darkness woven through her very essence. "Wait!" Her voice was sharp. "Stop!" "What is it?" "The curse." Her hands trembled as she studied the magical signature shimmering in her blood. "It's not dormant, it's active. Someone's been feeding it, maintaining it, strengthening it." She looked up at Luthan, horror dawning. "This isn't ancient magic. It's fresh, recent. Someone with access to both of us has been sustaining these curses." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Luthan's face went pale. "That's impossible. Who would have the knowledge, the opportunity?" He stopped. The answer was obvious, terrible, undeniable. "Alfred," they said simultaneously. "Your uncle." Veronica's voice was barely a whisper. He's been here the whole time. Access to your food, your rooms, access to my medicines. Luthan's hands clenched on the arms of his chair. My father. 5 years ago, my father died suddenly. They said it was his heart, but he was young, healthy. Alfred insisted on handling the funeral arrangements himself. His voice broke. What if father discovered something? What if Alfred killed him and cursed you to take the throne through you? Veronica finished the thought, her healer's mind piecing together the pattern. A paralyzed king is a puppet king. Alfred's been ruling through you for 5 years. But why curse you? Veronica touched her darkened veins, understanding flooding through her. Because I'm a healer. Because eventually someone would ask me to examine you, and I would have detected this, the magical signature, the active maintenance. I would have exposed him. She laughed bitterly. He cursed me before I could ever become a threat. Mona knew. Luthan looked at the little girl, who'd gone very still. She tried to tell me. He's been watching us this whole time, Veronica said, waiting to see if we'd get close to the truth. Then he already knows we're attempting the ritual tonight. Luthan's jaw set. He'll try to stop us. As if summoned by their words, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Slow, measured, unhurried. Alfred's voice drifted through the door, pleasant and poisonous. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. The door swung open, and Alfred stood framed in the entrance, flanked by guards wearing his personal insignia. His smile was gentle, grandfatherly, and utterly cold. Nephew, Lady Veronica. Little Mona. His eyes swept over the ritual preparations, the blood on the seal, their stricken faces. I see we've finally arrived at the truth. How unfortunate. I'd hoped you'd die before reaching this moment. He stepped inside, and the guards blocked the exit. But I've always been adaptable. Mona grabbed her mother's hand, her voice small but fierce. You won't hurt them. Alfred's laugh was soft. Sweet child, I already have. Alfred didn't waste time with subtlety. The next morning, the throne room filled with nobles, guards, and servants, all summoned by urgent decree. Mona clutched her mother's hand as they were escorted to stand before Luthan's throne, feeling every eye in the room weighing them, judging them. Alfred stood at Luthan's side, his face grave with manufactured concern. My lords and ladies, I come before you with a heavy heart. In the past 3 days, 7 palace servants have fallen mysteriously ill. All of them served in or near the healing ward. He paused, letting fear ripple through the crowd. The same ward where Lady Veronica has been residing. Murmurs erupted. Mona felt her mother's hand tighten. Furthermore, Alfred continued, his voice rising, our court physicians have detected traces of curse magic in the servant's blood, the same signature as the curse afflicting our beloved king. He turned to Veronica, his expression sorrowful. Lady Veronica, I accuse you of deliberate magical contamination. You have spread this curse intentionally, using your position to poison our people. That's a lie! Veronica's voice was weak but furious. I've done nothing. The evidence speaks for itself. Alfred produced several scrolls, medical reports written in language too technical for most to understand, but damning in their official appearance. For the safety of the realm, I propose immediate exile and execution. The contamination must be stopped. The court erupted in frightened agreement. Nobles backed away from Veronica as if she were diseased. Even Luthan's most loyal guards looked uncertain. Luthan's knuckles went white on his throne. Uncle, this is necessary, nephew. Alfred's tone was gentle, almost pitying. I know you've grown fond of the woman, but you cannot let sentiment compromise the kingdom's safety. Unless, he let the implication hang, unless the curse has already affected your judgment. The trap snapped shut. If Luthan protected Veronica, he appeared corrupted, possibly cursed into compliance. If he didn't, she died. Either way, Alfred won. Mona felt her world tilting. She looked at her mother, too weak to fight, too honest to lie convincingly. She looked at Luthan, trapped in his chair, trapped by politics, trapped by his uncle's perfect manipulation. Then she looked at Alfred's satisfied smile. Something inside her, something that had been building since the first time this man threatened her, finally broke free. "Wait!" Mona's voice was small, but it cut through the chaos. She pulled away from her mother and walked to the center of the room. "If my mum is cursed and spreading it, then I must be contaminated too." "Mona, no!" Veronica gasped. "I've been with her my whole life," Mona continued, her voice growing stronger. "I sleep in her bed when I have nightmares. I eat from her plate. I help her with healing work." She turned to face Alfred directly. "So if you're going to exile and execute her for being dangerous, you have to kill me too." The throne room went deathly silent. "Child, you don't understand," Alfred started. "I understand perfectly." Mona's eyes were dry, her chin raised. "You say my mum is spreading the curse. Well, I'm 8 years old, and I've been breathing the same air as her every single day. If she's contaminated, so am I." She spread her small arms. "So do it. Execute a little girl for being sick." Several nobles shifted uncomfortably. A woman in the back whispered something shocked. Even the guards looked uneasy. Alfred's mask slipped for just a moment. A flash of pure hatred directed at this impossible child, who kept ruining his plans. Luthan saw his opening and took it. "The child makes a valid point." His voice carried royal authority despite his weakened state. If Veronica is deliberately spreading the curse, surely her own daughter would show symptoms. Yet Mona appears healthy. "Appearances can be deceiving," Alfred tried. "Then I propose a test." Luthan spoke over him. "Lady Veronica will attempt the vault ritual tonight. The magic is keyed to detect truth. It was my father's final protection. If she is truly malicious, corrupted by dark intent, the vault's magic will reject her violently. If she is a victim, as I believe, it will accept her blood." He leaned forward. "Unless, uncle, you believe our ancestors' magic is insufficient to detect evil?" The court murmured approval. It was logical, traditional, and gave them a way to determine truth without executing a child. Alfred's jaw clenched. He'd been outmaneuvered by an 8-year-old and a paralyzed king. "Of course, the ancient magic is sufficient," he said smoothly. "I merely worry for the king's safety." "I will be there personally," Luthan said. "The ritual proceeds tonight. Lady Veronica will prove her innocence, or condemn herself. Let the old magic decide." Alfred bowed, his smile never wavering. "As you wish, nephew." But as the court dispersed, Mona caught the look Alfred shot toward one of his guards. A tiny nod, barely perceptible. He was planning something. Tonight at the vault, he wouldn't just let the magic decide. He would make sure they all died there. The vault entrance was a wound in the earth. Ancient stone stairs, spiraling down into darkness lit only by runes that pulsed like slow heartbeats. Mona held her mother's hand on one side, walking beside Luthan's chair as guards carefully maneuvered it down the steps on the other. Alfred followed behind, his footsteps echoing with false concern. "Are you certain about this, nephew? The magic down there hasn't been disturbed in decades." "I'm certain." Luthan's voice was granite. The chamber itself stole Mona's breath. Walls carved with symbols that seemed to shift and breathe. A circular seal in the floor glowing with silver light. And at the center, a pedestal holding an ornate box wrapped in chains of pure magic. "The cure," Veronica whispered, and Mona heard longing and hope and terror all tangled together. "We must perform the binding simultaneously," Luthan explained, reading from his father's notes. "Your healing gift and my bloodline magic merged. It will unlock the seal." They took their positions on opposite sides of the seal. Mona stood back, watching, praying to gods she wasn't sure existed. Alfred positioned himself near the entrance, his hand resting casually on a particular rune carved into the doorframe. Luthan and Veronica began the incantation, their voices weaving together. Blood from both dripped onto the seal, his royal, hers gifted. The magic responded, silver light rising, the chains around the cure beginning to dissolve. That's when Alfred pressed the rune. The vault screamed. Magic exploded outward in chaotic waves. Runes shattered like glass, spilling wild power. The walls groaned, stone cracking, and the ceiling began to rain dust and pebbles. "What did you do?" Luthan roared. Alfred's mask finally fell away completely. "What I should have done 5 years ago ensured you died with no witnesses." His smile was terrible. The vault's defenses, when triggered, consume everything inside. You'll be buried alive, crushed by your own ancestors' magic. And I'll tell the court how tragic it was, how I barely escaped, how the curse took you all. The collapse accelerated. Chunks of stone fell, the seal beneath them cracking. "We have to finish the ritual!" Veronica screamed over the chaos. But as they poured their combined magic into the cure, its true nature revealed itself in blazing clarity. The ancient magic spoke directly into their minds. Asterisk, one life for another. The cure requires sacrifice. Choose who dies so others may live. Alfred had designed it this way. He'd assumed Luthan, bitter and selfish, would never sacrifice himself for anyone. He'd been wrong. Luthan looked at Mona, brave, impossible Mona, who'd fought for them both. Then at Veronica, who'd shown him what it meant to carry pain with grace. His choice was instant, absolute. "Forgive me," he whispered, and channeled everything he had left into Veronica. His life force poured out like water from a broken vessel. The curse on Veronica shattered under the onslaught of pure magical sacrifice, darkness burning away from her veins. Color returned to her skin, strength to her limbs, her healing gift blazing back to full power. But Luthan crumpled, his breathing shallow, the light fading from his eyes. "No!" Veronica's scream was primal. She could feel her gift restored, could sense the curse broken, but the price was too high. "No! You don't get to die for me!" She threw herself beside him, pressing her hands to his chest. Her healing gift, now amplified by the royal magic he'd poured into her, surged forth. She reversed the flow, giving back what he'd given, pouring life into life, sacrifice meeting sacrifice. The ancient magic hesitated, confused. This wasn't how the curse was supposed to work. Alfred had built it on selfishness, on taking, on the assumption that love would falter when faced with death. But Luthan and Veronica were both choosing to die for each other. The magic couldn't process paradox. It recognized truth in their mutual sacrifice, something pure, something the curse's dark foundation couldn't comprehend or corrupt. The contradiction shattered the spell's logic. Both curses exploded simultaneously, dark magic screaming as it dissolved. Luthan gasped, feeling sensation flood back into his legs, his body. Veronica steadied him as he stood, actually stood, for the first time in 5 years. The vault's collapse stopped, the wild magic settling as the cure's purpose was fulfilled. Alfred, eyes wide with disbelief, turned to flee. He made it 3 steps before the entrance collapsed. Stone and rubble buried him in seconds, his scream cut short. The treachery he'd built, the trap he'd designed, consumed him in the end. The silence after was deafening. Luthan, standing on shaking legs, reached for Veronica. She caught him, and they held each other like drowning people finding shore. Mona, tears streaming down her face, crashed into them both, and they folded around her. 3 people who'd been broken, now holding each other together. "You're okay," Mona sobbed. "You're both okay." "Because of you," Luthan said, his voice raw with wonder. "You impossible, stubborn, brave little girl." Above them, servants called down, and rescue came. But for one perfect moment, in the ruins of Alfred's destruction, they were simply whole. 6 weeks could heal more than curses, Mona discovered. It could heal people, too. The palace had changed in ways both obvious and subtle. The throne room's heavy curtains were thrown open now, letting sunlight pour across marble floors. Servants smiled more. Laughter echoed in corridors that had known only whispers for 5 years. Luthan walked the halls daily, still amazed by the simple act of placing one foot in front of the other. He met with his council standing, visited the training yards to watch young soldiers spar, and sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, he would simply stand in the garden and feel grass beneath his feet. Veronica had taken over the healing wards with characteristic efficiency, training new healers in techniques that combined traditional medicine with magical theory. She'd saved 3 lives in the first week alone, and her reputation spread beyond the palace walls. People traveled from distant villages just to be seen by the healer who'd survived the impossible. But the real transformation was quieter, more profound. Mona noticed it in small moments. The way Luthan's hand would find her mother's across the breakfast table, how Veronica would laugh, really laugh, at his dry observations about courtly politics, the way they'd started finishing each other's sentences without realizing it. They'd fallen in love. Not because an 8-year-old had demanded it, not because a curse had forced them together, but because they'd chosen each other in the aftermath of darkness. So when Luthan arranged an elaborate dinner in the garden, Mona wasn't surprised. She sat on a bench, swinging her legs, pretending to study a book on healing herbs while watching her mother and the king walk among rose bushes. Luthan stopped beside a fountain, took Veronica's hand, and, still marveling at the ability, knelt on one knee. "Veronica," he began, his voice carrying across the garden, "I've been thinking about something a very wise person once suggested." Veronica's eyes sparkled with unshed tears and suppressed laughter. "Oh." "She proposed that I marry you. At the time, I thought she was a naive child with absurd ideas." He produced a ring, silver carved with intertwined roses and healing runes. Turns out, she was the smartest person in the entire kingdom. "Luthan, marry me, not because we're cursed or desperate or need each other to survive. Marry me because I choose you. Every day, every moment. Choose to spend the rest of my life with you." Veronica pulled him to his feet, still delighting in the fact that she could, and kissed him thoroughly. "Yes, you impossible man. Yes!" From her bench, Mona whooped and applauded. "Finally! I've been waiting forever." Luthan laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Forever? It's been 6 weeks." "6 weeks is forever when you're 8, Mona informed him, running over to crash into them both. "Besides, I told you marrying Mum was a good idea months ago." Veronica scooped her daughter up, something she'd been too weak to do for far too long. "You did. You were very insistent about it." "I'm insistent about lots of things." Mona grinned. "Like Luthan needing to smile more, and you needing to rest, and both of you needing to stop being stubborn." "Some things never change," Luthan said, but his tone was fond. He knelt again, this time to Mona's level, his expression growing serious. "Thank you. For everything. For refusing to give up when I'd given up on myself. For being braver than any adult I've ever known. You saved us both." Mona considered this, then wrapped her arms around his neck in a fierce hug. "That's what families do," she said simply. "We save each other." When she pulled back, Luthan's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Family," he repeated, tasting the word like something precious. "I like the sound of that." "Good, because you're stuck with us now." Mona took both their hands. "Come on, I'm hungry, and you promised we could have cake with dinner." "I promised no such thing. You're a king. You can order cake whenever you want. That's the whole point of being king." As they walked toward the palace together, Mona between them, chattering about the elaborate wedding she was already planning, sunlight streamed through those same arched windows that once illuminated only a bitter, broken man. Now they illuminated something different. A healer who'd found her strength again, a king who'd rediscovered his heart, and a little girl who'd fought impossible odds simply because love demanded it. Now they illuminated home. Mona looked up at her mother, then at Luthan, and felt something warm and settled in her chest. Not the desperate, terrified hope that had driven her to push open those throne room doors all those weeks ago. Just happiness. Simple, uncomplicated, safe, just family. And that, she thought, squeezing both their hands, was the best magic of all.